During this Lenten season leading up to Easter, we are reading this book, Garden City by John Mark Comer, and it is about, as the subtitle or the kind of secondary title there says, work, rest, and the art of being human. And we have spent the last 3 weeks looking at what Comer has to say about work, and it really is a lot of interesting things that inform our working life and how it relates to our identity in a little bit different way than maybe we would expect, and how we relate to our work. And you can find those previous weeks online, like I said earlier, but this week we are looking at something that we as people are really bad at doing, especially modern people. It's our first of 2 weeks talking about rest. And Comer starts on a personal note, talking about his own story of burnout. He was in his 20s when he planted Bridgetown Church, which is still a large, thriving community on the West Coast in Portland. But he talks about how the first year, as things kind of blew up in a fun way. I mean, stuff kept kind of snowballing. It got bigger and bigger, and things were really excited as this church plant. Things were exhausting, but they were exhilarating. He said the second year, when they hadn't changed anything they were doing, they just kept going, kept pushing. He said the second year they were exhausting but good. And he said, so exhausting but exhilarating, exhausting but good. He goes, by year 3 it was just exhausting. And he was saying that he was sick all the time, just like physically sick. He was anxious. He was short with his wife. He was, all these different things occurred because he didn't have a great relationship with his work. And that resonates with a lot of stories of burnout that I've heard. It's not that anyone wants to experience burnout. They just think that they're above it. Maybe you've been there before, but you're like, oh, burnout, that's for people who don't have the work ethic that I have. Or that's for people who aren't, and they just must not be as good as me. And even some people who are experiencing burnout, they're like, well, this dead inside feeling I have, I guess that means that I'm working hard enough. We really don't have a great relationship with burnout and a work-life balance. And one of the big reasons why people struggle with this is we have a big issue, we have a big difficulty in anticipating our own struggles, in anticipating our own capacity. One personal anecdote that's a little bit silly, but I think it fits this context. So I was in college, and this was Chris, back when my metabolism worked. I was in shape guy. This was Chris, 50 pounds ago. And my roommate Tom was a bigger, stronger guy. Okay, and so what happened was a girl shows up at our room, which is good, and she says, "Is Tom here?" Which is bad. No, and I said, "No, Tom's not here. But do you need help with anything?" And she goes, "Tom said he would help me move my TV." And I said, "Well, I can help you move your TV." And I was a music major. The curls that I did were with my folder when I read we had some really intense page turns. So all that's to say, but I said, yeah, we can do that. Sure, I can help. So I go and grab this TV in her dorm room. I lift it, and it is heavy. All right. I know that it wasn't as big as the big box tube TVs that we had when I was really little. I get it. It wasn't that. But this was, going on 15 years ago. So it was when flat screen TVs they found out how to make them big, but they hadn't found out how to make them like wallpaper like they are now. And so this TV, I pick it up, and it was heavy. But 2 things. One, I didn't want to admit it was heavy. Obviously, I just said I could help. And then 2, it felt fine at first. And so I thought, I'm sure this is all right. So if at the dorms at Drake, parking is at a premium. And so I said, she's like, "You got it?" I'm like, "Got it. I'm doing good." It's out here, right? And I was like, "Why do you have such large TV?" No. And so I'm following her out she's like, "Well, we'll just go out to my car." Her car, it turns out, was on the other side of the building, 2 parking lots away. And I do something that maybe if you're like a person that lifts weights or something, like you would know like what this is like, or if you've ever experienced it. We get to at the end of the first parking lot, and my arms like start to shake a little bit, and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna drop this girl's TV because of my own hubris, right? Because of my own inability to know my own limits, I'm going to actually end up not serving somebody like I wanted to. See how this fits what we're talking about? If we don't have the ability to know what we need, not just now, but if we can't forecast where our actions are leading us, it's not just going to hurt us, it's going to potentially affect some other people as well, right? Wanting to be the guy, wanting to be the man, wanting to not need anything from anybody else, and genuinely wanting to be helpful. All of those things together can lead to, if we pair it with a lack of understanding of our own selves and our own capacities, it can lead to burnout, and it can actually hurt people. That might seem like a silly example because it is, but there are a lot of high-achieving, capable, well-meaning men that metaphorically have their arms shaking trying to hide that they're slowly going to die inside. Right? What's up? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't drop the TV. Yeah. It made a worse point because the point that I'm now seemingly making in front of you all is that just keep going and it'll be okay. That is not what I'm saying. Thank you, group. Guys are on the list. See if your name tags print next week. No, no, I'm just kidding. But right, what we're saying is there's a lot of guys though that are at that point that they maybe got into something, maybe they took on too much at work, maybe they took on too much in their personal life, maybe they signed up for way too many things to volunteer for, and they don't want to let anybody down, and they don't want to admit that they need help, and so instead they just start to hate everything. And if we're not self-aware, then all of a sudden we start to think that it's everybody else's fault. You ever talk to somebody who's really burnt out and it's about everybody else, but you're like, dude, this is all you, man. Like, it's hard to see sometimes because even if you're well-intentioned, you have to know your own limits. It turns out that rest is essential. And we know that this is not just because God tells us to do it as some instruction for us weak mortal humans. God's like, well, you guys need to take a day off even though I don't need to. Because God modeled rest for us as well. Just like God modeled how to work in the Genesis story, we talked about that our first couple weeks, God also modeled what it looks like to rest. We can miss this simply from the fact that it comes to creation, right? On the seventh day, he rested. It's like a story that we all grew up with, so it seems commonplace. But do you ever think about this? God didn't need to rest. God had zero reason why God needed to take a day off. Because God is God. God doesn't expend energy in the same way that we do. God didn't make creation and went, wow, I'm spent. God created out of an abundance of love and the infinite power that God has, and then rested. Why? For us. God rested to show us the rhythm that we need, but so often ignore. So our author here in our book says that we need to drill down on two different words that are used in this Genesis story if we want to understand resting. The first one is the word blessed. The word in Hebrew is barak. In Hebrew, it's often translated as blessing. And within this creation narrative, it's used when God blesses something, it has the ability to create life. God baraked 3 times in Genesis. The first time is when he blessed the living creatures, aka the animal kingdom. He said, he blessed, the language usually reads like this, he blessed them and told them to be fruitful and multiply and to fill the earth. So the first time he blessed things were the things that took in breath in God's world and told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Check. First thing. The second time is when he blessed people, and he said the same thing. He said, he blessed humanity and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Check, 2 times. The third and final time that God blessed things in the creation of the universe as we know it, the third and final time God blessed is when he blessed the 7th day that he created. The day of rest is the third thing. The first 2 times was because people had the ability to create life. And the third thing is just the same. Just like the other 2 times that God blessed, the Sabbath, this day of rest, is blessed to be able to give life. Many of us talk about wanting the blessings of God. We're like, man, I want all the blessings God can give me in my life. And yet we readily reject one of the first blessings in creation, which is that God models and then gives us the instruction to discontinue our labor for a day. Many of us readily reject this blessing simply because it requires us to slow down. The other word that John Mark talks about needing to understand is the word holy. It is kadosh. It's kind of like if you've seen Kung Fu Panda, that's what you were thinking about. Yeah, Kung Fu Panda, he says skadoosh whenever he like attacks something with Kung Fu. But it's kadosh, and kadosh means holy. And we talk about holiness a lot in the Bible, but Comer points out, especially in kind of Hebrew scholarship amongst rabbis, there's this thing called the principle of first use, which sounds fancy, but basically what it means is the first time that you use a phrase that gets used a bunch of times other than that, if you really want to drill down on what that word means, you look at the first time that it's used in Scripture, because that sets the precedence. And usually one of the ways that Hebrew works is that by using specific words, you link back to other times that it was used. It's one of the main ways that you connect stories, especially in the Old Testament. And so when is the first time that we talk about holiness? It's right here in this story. When this is used in the Hebrew Scriptures, the first time this word kadosh is used in Scripture is on the Sabbath day. God blessed this day, barak, and made it holy. Holy means that it is set apart and distinct from other things. So God set this day apart by making it and made it life-giving. He is doing everything that he can to set this day separate from everything else. But more than just resting like a day off, it's something a little bit different. Because eventually we just scrapped a day of rest because it kind of didn't fit our schedule. It was just kind of easier to not, right? But Comer says it this way that's better than I can say it, so let me find this. A holy Sabbath to the Lord. This language of holy to the Lord is used all throughout Scriptures. It can also be translated as dedicated to the Lord. So the Sabbath is an entire day that is holy, set aside, dedicated to the Lord. It's a day for rest and it's a day for worship because it's for God. When I Sabbath, I run everything through this grid. Is this rest and is it worship? If the answer is to both questions is yes, then I delight in it. If the answer is no, then I hold off until the next day, because the Sabbath is not the same thing as a day off. Make sure you know the difference. On a day off, you don't work for your employer, but you still work. You grocery shop, you go to the bank, you mow the lawn, you work on a remodel project, you chip away at the sci-fi novel you've been writing. His words, not mine. On the Sabbath, you rest and you worship. That's it. It's a choice that we get to make because God calls the Sabbath holy, but we are also told to, it's interesting, keep it holy. We're told, so God can bestow something with holiness, but something that we get to participate in as we are the tiny images, the little statues of God that we talked about in the first couple of weeks. As we are made to be God's images, God's physical representations in the world, we get to keep this day holy. It is still holy, but to us, we have to bless it to keep it that way within the context of our own lives. It needs to be maintained because each and every one hearing my voice knows how easy it is for it to just be another day. That's part of the irony. The day that is meant, that's the day that is supposed to be given to us to be this life-giving thing. The rhythm of our world has made it actually easier just to skip it. But we get to choose to make it holy despite how difficult that might seem. John Mark used a strange image, but the more and more I thought about it, it kind of is a perfect image for this. He said, keeping the Sabbath holy is kind of like trying to protect a delicate flower on a New York subway. If you have a little flower that just in a tiny pot, and you need to get it somewhere completely unscathed. If you've ever been to New York City, you know that the pace of life there is just a different animal, especially on the subway. It's not impossible to get a tiny flower through the subway unscathed, but you have to do it on purpose. You have to mean to protect this thing. You have to think about it. You're not just going to be like, well, hope this makes it, throw it in your bag. The thing's going to be wrecked by the end of it. A lot of us have tried to do Sabbath in the past by just like trying not to do too much. My genuine question for you, and I don't mean this as a condescending thing, I mean it as just a check-in with your own self. How is that going? How is it going getting rest? Are you rested? I know that I'm oftentimes really not. And so this is something that I can work at in my own life as well. But this is the challenge of us as modern people, but also just as people. It's a part of our brokenness. But unlike many instances of our human brokenness, this is something that we've been confused enough about to take pride in. You ever have seen guys who in small talk try to outbusy each other? Oh, how you doing? Oh, yeah, man, I'm just pretty tired, actually. Somebody's, like, being honest. They're like, it's wild. I worked 60 hours this last week. Oh, I remember that. Those days I used to work 80 hours. And you're like, okay, that's not what we were doing. But my point is that it's a point of pride, right? And part of that comes from pain. If you really struggled, you want to be able to boast in your struggle because you made it through. You worked hard. Absolutely you did. I'm not minimizing anybody's work ethic. This isn't about work ethic. This is about survival. This is not just about survival, but it's also about thriving. It's about being the men that God created us to be. And so many of us are a shell of the person that we would be simply because there's just no gas left in the tank. If you're like me, you know that there's a certain tired you get where all of a sudden your capability to handle stuff gets a lot worse. You become shorter with the people around you. Like John Mark said at the beginning in his story, in his kind of personal narrative, he got grouchy with the people in his life. He was just physically ill. They actually think that rest is leading to a health crisis because people are just destroying themselves. Some companies even starting to institute kind of a hybrid kind of all-week work schedule. And simply because you work from home does not mean that you're resting. It might also be that your rest is less effective because your home is your workplace. These lines are getting confused. I'm just telling you that we need to be able to prioritize and set boundaries for ourselves in order for us to survive. Don't boast in your inability to rest. Now, you might say, but Chris, sounds a whole lot like a mandated behavior. This is the Old Testament law, Chris. We don't have to live under the law of the Sabbath anymore, right? Like Jesus did away with that. John Mark Comer said it better than I think I ever could. You can skip Sabbath, but just like you can eat concrete, it's not illegal, it's not a sin, but it is dumb. That seems like a kind of a crass way to say it, but it really is pretty great. I'm not telling you that you are technically sinning against God because we are free from the old covenant. What I am telling you is that technically you could argue it is a sin, technically. But again, remember, if you start an argument with technically, you already lose. But God did create us for this way, so you are living outside the lines of what you were created for. We were created to rest. We were created to worship. We were created to, and that looks a lot, that doesn't mean, so get your butt to the 11 o'clock service or whatever. I'm saying we are meant to take time to recognize that we are loved. And more than anything, John Mark says it's also a good check-in with yourself, because guess what? You're going to rest for a day. You're going to quit the hamster wheel stuff that you do the rest of the week, and then you're going to come back and the world's still going to be there. It turns out if you stop working and striving and hustling, one of my least favorite words, it turns out if we do that, the world still stands. It turns out that you're not nearly as important as you think you are. And that's a blessing. That's a freedom. John Mark ends this chapter by saying the important thing, one of the blessings of Sabbath is to realize you're not that important, to realize that there is indeed a God, and it is not you. So let's do that. Let's help let the Sabbath become a rhythm and an essential practice, not as some spiritual flex, but quite the opposite, a chance for us to pause and worship, not run the race for the day, and to realize that there is a God and I am not him. Amen? Some questions for us as we continue on this morning. What is your relationship to rest? Is that a little bit small? Sorry about that. What is your relationship to rest? Do you feel like you have enough rest? Or do you feel like the times that you're not working is actually restful? This is key. A lot of us jump into other stuff that doesn't necessarily feed our soul, and you're like, well, there's a lot of other stuff I got to get done. Absolutely. I'm not disparaging anything else any other way that you're spending your time. I am saying that some of us got to do it differently, or else we're going to end up dropping the TV. Okay? We don't want, we end up hurting other people. We end up hurting other people's stuff. We end up letting our tiredness affect other people's lives. So what does that look like for you? And then what is your relationship with the Sabbath? What do you do that day? What does your Sabbath look like? And you're like, well, I don't have one. Good start. But otherwise, do you do some things that fill your soul? Do you do things that worship God? Again, we're going to define worship as being in awe and presence of God and giving thanks to God. We have worship services. I would encourage you to come to them, which I know that an overwhelming amount of you do, but I'm saying that can be an act of worship. It doesn't need to be... it's not just another thing in your weekend, and I hope that it's not for you, but it bears repeating. But then when you're outside of this building, it's also, you can do more worship. I don't mean turn on worship music, although you can. What I'm saying is there's the ways that we can spend our time using the things God has put in our hands to worship God, to give thanks, to be aware of God's presence. Not in a work type of way, but in a gratefulness type of way. And if you ever need help figuring out some of those things, be glad to talk about it. But it looks different for each and every one of us. But what do you do on that Sabbath day? And the last one is, what is one way you can be more intentional with rest / the Sabbath this week? What's one change you can make? If there's a lot of kind of schedule stuff that you need to make happen, honestly, you can just kind of go, even this week, some small step of going, well, one day I know that I'm going to set aside some time to truly rest and worship, to remember who I am, whose I am, like we like to say at church a lot, but we're going to spend time specifically orienting ourselves around the truth of the gospel, to set aside anything else to do. Get out in nature. Get out and if you have a hobby that you have that's less intensive of stuff you don't have to do, but something God has just put in your hands that really kind of fills your cup, do that. Not so you can monetize it and make it your side hustle. Side hustle culture has also eliminated a lot of rest. My point is, do you do anything? One of the things that blesses my life, I love to play guitar. I'm not a good guitar player. Oh my gosh, I just love playing it so much. I don't sell music that I make. I don't do any of that. I just love to play it. It's truly just a restful activity for me. It's just peaceful. And I know that if I don't do it for a week, then stuff starts to get weird. My point is what are some things in your life that you're not trying to monetize, that you're not trying to achieve with, and just enjoy? Just rest in, and while you're doing it, thanking God that you are not required to achieve your own salvation, not required to achieve your own worth. It turns out if we start working then the next week from that place, it can change a whole lot of things. Amen? We'll finish talking about rest this next week, and then we will see you then, okay? Grace and peace, friends. Go be good to each other, and we'll see you then.